Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Game Things. I'm your host for the week, Ming, and today we'll be covering news from the most recent Game Awards. Now, there are a ton of great games that were revealed as well as a couple of new trailers that were shown during the Game Awards, like for example, Final Fantasy XVI. However, due to the high number of reviews and trailers that were shown, we won't be diving in depth to all of these trailers, so we highly suggest checking out those trailers that you guys did not hear us cover in this episode. The first title that we are going to cover today is Horizon Forbidden West Burning Shores, the DLC that was just announced for Horizon Forbidden West. This DLC will be available on April 19th, but only on the PS5. So yeah, pretty unfortunate for all you PS4 players. This DLC will feature a post-apocalyptic Los Angeles with areas filled with lava flowing like waterfalls. All in all, this DLC actually looks to be a pretty great one, if only it wasn't a PS5 exclusive. Hopefully it will eventually be released on PS4 as well, and who knows, maybe it might even get a PC release in the future like Horizon Zero Dawn. Speaking of DLC, another rather popular game will be getting a rather interesting DLC, and that title is Dead Cells. Now, you might be wondering, why do I say that this DLC is interesting? The reason for that is because this upcoming DLC is a crossover with Castlevania that will be launching in the first quarter of 2023. As for what sort of content exactly you'll see from this new DLC, you basically will see things like 14 new weapons, 2 new biomes, 3 new bosses, 20 new outfits, a ton of new soundtracks, and most importantly, a brand new storyline for the beloved roguelike. At this point, we however do not know whether the DLC will be free or paid, but regardless, the DLC will be a banger that you should definitely check out. Oh, and I do suggest giving Dead Cells a shot if you have never played this amazing roguelike before. If you enjoy the Dead Cells graphical design, then the next title might be something that you might be interested in as well. And this title is called EarthBlade. This title is currently planned to be released in 2024 and is brought to you by the devs of Celeste, the very well made platformer that might have caused a bit of rage to some of the people right here. Just a tad bit. Well, unfortunately or fortunately, this new title EarthBlade is not going to be a platformer. Instead, it's going to be a 2D exploration and action game. In terms of the art style, like I mentioned earlier, it does look a bit like Dead Cells, but if you ask me, I feel like it's very similar to Monster Sanctuary instead, a 2D monster taming game. So for those of you that are watching on YouTube, you can look on the screen now and basically compare the two, and it really looks really similar except for some slight differences in color. In any case, given how well made Celeste is, I'm quite confident that EarthBlade will be a great game of the same quality when it's released. So if you're into 2D exploration and action game, make sure to jot this down and put it on your wishlist when it's available to be wishlisted. If you don't like solo games, then maybe this next title, Crash Team Rumble, might be for you. As you might have wondered, Crash Team Rumble of course features the popular characters from the Crash Bandicoot franchise. The game itself is a 4v4 multiplayer game where you face off against each other and try and score as many Wumpa fruits into a goal as fast as possible. Of course, your opponents will also have the ability to interrupt you with various different abilities as well. For example, the mask from Crash, I don't really know what the mask is called, I can't really remember, but you know what I mean. So yeah, the mask is basically one of the abilities that you can use to cock block your opponents. So it's basically something like Omega Strikers, just that instead of, well, football, it's kind of like basketball and not top-down base. Yeah. The game actually looks somewhat interesting, and considering that it's a multiplayer game, it will most likely be a free game, fingers crossed. So when it's released in 2023, I suggest to just try it out and give it a shot. At least I know that I will. If my friends are up to play this game, I will give it a shot. Speaking of multiplayer games, if you have a large group of friends chilling and can't really find a great game that can accommodate the large group of players, then might I suggest some Among Us. Yes, you heard that right. Among Us is back with a brand new hide and seek game mode. Instead of the usual social deduction game, the new hide and seek game mode will reveal the killer at the very beginning, and the other players are tasked to hide in the map to the best of their abilities. But of course, this might be a bit unfair to the crewmates as they are virtually defenseless against the killer. So to make it a bit more balanced, crewmates can hide in the vents once per game. In order for the killer to win, the killer would have to kill off all the crewmates before the timer runs out. Whereas the crewmates on the other hand will have to, other than just hide, try and clear as many tasks as possible to speed up the countdown timer to have a shot of winning the game. All in all, if it's been a long while since you last played Among Us with your mates, maybe you might want to try out this brand new game mode and perhaps have some fun with your friends. Moving on, the last and final game that we will be covering from the Game Awards is one that I am extremely hyped for, and it's Hades 2. That's right, the insanely fun and popular game Hades is coming back with a brand new sequel, but the one thing that is different for this new title is that instead of the main character being Zagreus, it's a brand new character called Melano, a sister of Zagreus, and her title is the Princess of the Underworld. While Melano is Zagreus' sister, you actually don't have to play the first Hades title to enjoy the story of Hades 2. You might think that the story is interrelated, but it actually isn't. Although, I would say that irregardless, do still play Hades 1 as it's a definitely great game. But of course, it's still a great plus to be able to enjoy Hades 2 without having known what went on in Hades 1. All in all, I'm extremely hyped for this title that will be available in 2023 but in early access only, unfortunately. But either way, I will most likely still get it day one and have a ton of fun. But if you are like me and would like to know more information about the game as we get more new information being revealed, then I highly suggest you subscribe to Game Things and click on the notification bell to stay updated to all the latest gaming news. Moving on from the Game Awards, we have some rather interesting Ubisoft games finally available on Steam, and the titles are Immortal Phoenix Rising, Roller Champions, and Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Immortal Phoenix Rising, which was released a week earlier, is an action-adventure game featuring a character called Phoenix as he or she goes around exploring the realm of the Greek gods. Gameplay-wise, it draws heavy inspiration from Breath of the Wild, but well, with Greek gods. So if you need a Breath of the Wild-like game to fix your itch of waiting for Breath of the Wild 2, then maybe give Immortal Phoenix Rising a shot. As for Roller Champions, it's basically something like basketball, but with roller skates on. Honestly, if you're interested in games like Rocket League, then you might be interested in Roller Champions, but if you don't really enjoy Rocket League, I would say you can just give Roller Champions a pass, because this week we have a lot of way better games that you should focus on. As for Assassin's Creed Valhalla, while it does finally feel good for it to be available on Steam, it unfortunately will not have any achievements at all. By the way, remember Final Fantasy that was mentioned at the very start of the episode? Guess what? Final Fantasy is making another appearance in this episode with the newly released Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis trailer. You might be wondering, what even the heck is this? So, Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis is, as its name suggests, a Final Fantasy VII game, but on mobile. Yeah, you heard that right. It's on mobile. Because it's on mobile, it will obviously feature heavily toned down graphics as well as a different style of gameplay. But the most important aspects like the story of Final Fantasy VII is still kept intact, and it even features Crisis' core storyline as well, which is really cool. The game will have its closed beta launch sometime during the summer of next year, so for all of you Final Fantasy hardcore fans out there, be sure to keep an eye out for closed beta registration if you're interested in playing Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis. And that's all the news that we will be going through this week. Now let's talk about some games that you can get your hands on right now, starting with Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion. Surprise! Final Fantasy is once again back on our episode, but in all seriousness, Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion is not a title that you want to miss at all. To give you guys some context, this title is the remake of the original PSP game Crisis Core, and Crisis Core is easily one of the best games of the PSP era. Now, just think about it. One of the greatest games of that time finally updated with fresh and new graphics. Hot damn son, you are in for a massive treat. Personally, I'm super excited for this game. I already bought it day one on release and can't wait to sink in hours into this awesome game, as I had a ton of fun playing the original game on PSP. The best part is that based on some reviews that I've seen online so far, it's actually just as good as the original game, and perhaps even better than the original. So with that in mind, I highly suggest getting the game on either PS5, PS4, Xbox Series S and X, Xbox One and Switch, and even on PC. So yeah, you have a ton of options to choose from to play this game on. Pick your poison, and I really suggest you check out this game because it's really that good. The next title that we are covering is High on Life. High on Life is a third-person shooter game from the creators of Rick and Morty. As one might expect from Rick and Morty, this game is extremely interesting and weird. The entire premise of the game is that humans are being captured and used as a type of drug. Now, you, as a human, has to find ways to help all the other humans escape from their captivity. Throughout your journey, you will encounter various other aliens that will act as your weapons and aliens that are your enemies. Yes, you heard that right. You'll encounter aliens that will become your weapon. Yup, living, breathing aliens. So yeah, your weapon will effectively have a face on it, and well, it can talk to you and will have their own unique personality. So yeah, pretty weird, but in a good way, I guess. In any case, the game is still one that I would suggest trying out solely because of how unique and different it is. If you're interested in trying out the game, you can get the game now on Xbox Series S and X, Xbox One, as well as PC. Moving on to our next title, it is a slightly more relaxing one, and it's called Aka, featuring a red panda. The game is an open world game where you travel around the world meeting all sorts of characters and learn more about the general story of the world you inhabit. While exploring, you can also construct your own base and farms to sustain yourself. So think Stardew Valley, but with more story and more relaxation. There are even various minigames that you can partake in as you progress further into the game. So basically just more ways to have fun. All in all, Aka is basically a game for people that just want to have a more casual and relaxing experience. So if you think this is a game that suits you, you can get it now on PC and Nintendo Switch. The last and final title we will be featuring this week is Blacktail. Blacktail is a first-person action-adventure game featuring Slavic myths, specifically the tale of Baba Yaga. Throughout the game, you play as Yaga, a young witch that is well versed in archery and magic. And throughout the game, you encounter various characters, and how you respond to them will effectively affect the worldview of the game. For instance, if Yaga leans more towards the dark and malicious side, she will end up as the Baba Yaga that kids fear. Whereas if you lean more towards the good side, you might end up as a guardian of sorts. Basically, it's a game that allows for moral decisions, and really how the game ends up entirely lies on the player, which is a really great concept that I can appreciate and enjoy a lot. All in all, Blacktail looks to be a pretty interesting game, as it reminds me of Elder Scrolls, but with a slightly different twist, of course. Irregardless, I still think it's worth a shot just because you don't really see a lot of games covering Slavic myths, so it's definitely something that you should look into if you're interested in mythology in general. That basically wraps up our featured release segment for the week. Now let's move on to the favorite and most important segment, Free Things. So here's the deal for this week's Free Things segment. At the point of recording the episode, we don't actually know what games are being given out for free by Epic Games Store. though our editor thinks that it will most likely be 15 days of free games, similar to last year. So I won't be listing any of them out today as we don't have that information yet, but as of when we get our information, our editor will add it on in the description or in the video, so be sure to keep an eye out on that. That basically marks the end of our episode for this week. Once again, I was your host for the week, Ming, and I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you guys next week on another episode of Game Things.